Okay, we are back on watching the swearing in. All right, it's the big moment. We have now got a new president, our 47th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Got the military salute by the Army. Obviously, lots of applause going on, and people very excited about this. A place where you can watch it without the licensing, all that stuff. But YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, they still don't like it. So we're going to watch it here together. Hopefully, you have it up on your screen. We've been able to bring you some folks as we, watch this ceremony go on and try to understand and how to think about this and what perspective we should take going forward. And I know that there's a lot of folks, particularly those who are representing our Hispanic communities, Latino, Latinx communities that are watching this kind of with a mixed bag here. So I'm really interested in how we would think about that. If you've been engaged with color commentary for a long time, you know that we've got some great guests that come on, and one of those great guests that we've brought on several times to speak into lots of this, work around how do you think about organizing and protest, but then also to speak into just some of the ways that the Latino and Latinx community might be experiencing life and experiencing this moment. One of the guests we brought in has been the Reverend Dr. Alexia Salvatierra. And so we're going to bring her in and engage with her with some conversation as we watch the rest or watch some of this inauguration here. So let's welcome in Dr. Salvatierra. Hello, Alexia. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, Marcus. I've been better.
Yeah.
I've been
I
better.
imagine everything I know about you that this would be an interesting day. So let us know, like, what are you feeling? Where's it coming from?
Well, the last time that Donald Trump was president, he led an administration that was more anti-immigrant than any administration that I've experienced in my 40 years of working with immigrant communities. And it was anti-immigrant in a way that violated both international law and any set of ethical principles. So we're expecting not only more of the same, but more of the same on steroids to go along with the rhetoric. And I want to name that when we are dealing with this administration on immigration, we're not just dealing with President Trump, who obviously says many things that he doesn't follow through on. We're talking about Stephen Miller, who is much more focused, much more conscious around policy, much shrewder around policy, more strategic, more informed. And the kinds of policies that he led and pushed in the first administration were horrendous. And he's excited. He feels like he has carte blanche now.
Mm.
And so we are expecting a wave of terror.
Yeah, it's that conversation of terror, right? So as I've talked to folks um, who represent the immigration community, there's been sort of obviously a section of that group that is talking about terror. But I know that there's a particular type of immigrant that seems to be in the crosshairs more than others, right? Because we've got a lot of immigrants that are here in the country who've overstayed visas and things of that nature, but that doesn't seem to be where Steve Miller and the crew is focusing their efforts. Is that true?
Well, not when it comes to Steve Miller's. He
Okay,
is most interested in the border, but he is anti all immigrants. And you're
gotcha.
right. Roughly half of the people that are here undocumented at this point did not come across the border. They overstayed a visa. So, yeah, immigrants who are here without sufficient documentation come from all over the world. And the focus of the rhetoric is the border. But Stephen Miller is much broader in his anti. For
Mm.
example, last time he underfunded and slowed way down family applications from everywhere in the globe. So no, he's on it.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
wants no immigration. And so, the focus is the rhetoric paints everybody who comes across our southern border as a terrorist, a criminal, rapist, somebody who is coming across without legitimate reasons and needs to be thrown out. And anybody, not just anybody who's coming across currently, but anybody who's ever come across the border undocumented. So people who've been here for 20, 30 years as part of the fabric of our society are all marked for deportation according to the mass deportation rhetoric. But actually we expect changes across the board that affect everyone in the system or anyone that has anything to do with the system. Just another example under Stephen Miller is he appointed a bunch of immigration judges that had no experience in immigration and no knowledge of immigration. So, he was just like, no, we're gonna shut this place down.
Yeah, yesterday Trump gave something in his speech. He said 52% of immigrants from the border participated in crime, which I thought 52% is an egregious amount. And
you can't get fact checking anymore, right?
You can't get fact check. So I would have loved for him to have cited that, because I'm like, where are you pulling that data from? What do you mean by illegal activity? What,
so
because that's the stuff that's creating the terror.
Right. There's two statistics you should know. One is that criminals are about 1 to 3% of the population, and immigrants are lower than the rest of the population, and undocumented immigrants are lower than that, just so that you have that picture in mind. But there's this federal crime statistic that they throw around of 14%, and that includes all people who've committed immigration violations.
Right.
So
okay.
Okay, which are actually technically not crimes in most states in the country.
Right.
Yeah.
In Texas, there's a different system where they're now considered crimes. But a number of immigration violations that are civil immigration violations have become criminal violations in Texas.
So,
but still, that's the 14% figure. So no, it's completely anti-immigrant scapegoating. That's all it is.
It does sound like that. What, from a church point of view, from the Christian community point of view, who sees the issue as, how do I care for my neighbor who is my immigrant, who is an immigrant, who's stepping into what feels like an era where they're a target, to say it lightly. Yeah. What would you say is some of the best ways for a church or the church to respond or to be helpful?
So there are two really, there are three actually really powerful networks right now that if people want to help, they need to be aware of and support in different ways. So there's the Sanctuary Movement is back. And the Sanctuary Movement, has been around in this country. The most recent version of the Sanctuary Movement has been around since the 1980. I was part of it. That's why when I was a youngin'. And that's English speaking primarily. And it's run through Church World Service through Noel Anderson. And those are mostly English speaking congregations that have decided to stand with people facing deportation. So the Sanctuary Movement will do a variety of things, from legal help and direct service to sheltering people that want to be sheltered in churches to, a whole long list of different ways of advocating for immigrants and standing with immigrants. So churches can certainly join the new Sanctuary Movement. There'll be a pledge coming out soon, but just reach it through Church World Service. And they'll have a website up soon as well. In Spanish, there are a number of us who have come together as national organizations and regional organizations that we're a coalition of coalitions. And basically it's called La Iglesia que acompaña al migrante, which is the church that accompanies the migrant. And we're giving monthly webinars to update people on what they can do. A number of our churches, immigrant churches, are always helping immigrants. Bottom line, we minister with the immigrant community. And so we're understanding what we need to do to make sure that we can make a credible religious liberty argument if we're in some way attacked legally because of our work in supporting immigrants. We are also working with non-immigrant churches to set up sister church programs and immigrant funds, immigrant support funds that different kinds of churches and denominations can set up, so that churches that are immigrant led and are walking with immigrants can access some support to help in that process. Because there's definitely going to initially go after people that are in the system in one way or another. So they have their addresses. If people are not at that address, it will be much harder to find them. So they're going to go to people at their home addresses, but they're also, we have a lot of experience in this, going to do what's called collateral detention, which means that if you happen to be in the same place, if you happen to be visiting somebody or living with somebody who is on the list, who they have an address for, you will be picked up as well if you don't have your papers with you, or if you don't have papers, adequate papers. So we know that's going to be the initial move. And, obviously, if people just live in a different place, they're not going to be as easy to find. But if you have been in this country for multiple years, you've been working, you've been part of the fabric of your neighborhood, you may even own your house. And that's really difficult. Nobody wants to leave, but that's what you're going to have to do. The sort of second phase that we expect is to end the various programs through which people are here legally, so that they suddenly become illegal when they've been legal. So people that are here on humanitarian parole, people that are here on temporary protected status, which means they're in the process of being vetted to be considered refugees. The administration has made it very clear that they're going to try to end those programs as soon as possible, and certainly not renew the ones that are ending, because they have a certain time limit for any country that people come from. So if you're from Venezuela, you have a certain time limit through which you can be accepted into this country through humanitarian parole or temporary protected status. And those basically have to do with your country is in such a terrible mess that to be faithful to our commitment as a country, international commitment to receive refugees, that we're going to consider that everyone coming from that country, because the country is in such a horrible situation and people are being persecuted violently, that they can come while they're trying to figure out, while that country is trying to stabilize, and while individuals are trying to explore whether they have an individual case. That bar is much higher for an individual case. So temporary protected status, for example, exists for Haiti, which, Haiti is a nightmare right now, right? So temporary protected status exists, that people can be here from Haiti while they're exploring whether they meet the individual criteria for asylum or refugee status. Those time out. So he's definitely not going to renew them when they time out, although former President Biden did extend a few of them, but he's also talking about just ending them before they time out, which means that, let's say you're from Haiti and you're working under a work permit and you're living in St. Louis and part of a substantial Haitian community that the larger community of St. Louis really values, because they needed them to work the jobs. They needed them to start the small businesses. So let's say you're there and you're doing that and your family's there. Maybe you've even had a child since you've been here who is currently an American citizen. But your program is going to end and your process of vetting will end with it, and you will just be shipped back to Haiti. Unless, of course, you leave your house and go move somewhere else and try to live in the shadows. So those are sort of the immediate threats that we're looking at. And when I say you're in the system, I don't mean that you've necessarily committed a crime. Someone is in the system who has what's called deferred deportation, which is what all the dreamers have. That means that, you're tangled up in our ineffective, illogical, inhumane immigration system. And it's recognized that you really have a legitimate case, but your legitimate case can't be considered because of some regulation or other that you're trying to struggle your way through. And so, you get to go, while you're fighting your way through the courts on this, you get to go every year and show that you haven't committed crimes, that you're supporting your family, and then you get another year to keep fighting, because these processes take forever. He's basically indicated that there will be no deferred deportation. So when I
Mm.
say you're in the system, I don't mean you've committed a crime. I mean, you're mixed up in this crazy system and trying to figure your way out through with lawyers. And at least the early indications are that all those people have a target on their back. And we don't know about the Dreamers because the Dreamers
Right.
are a politically delicate football. And so he has not named them specifically. But in fact, what they have is deferred deportation.
Right. Yeah, and that's really good info. I know we'll have a friend of ours who is an immigration lawyer that does some work down in Houston. That'll be in here just to kind of give us even more insider baseball as much as she can, for sure.
So let me go back to what the church can do is,
Oh,
I want to say when I'm where the fires are in Southern California, which
right.
has been another horrendous nightmare, and a horrendous nightmare for immigrants on top of, we've got
On
two
top of
fires
that.
going at the same time.
Yeah.
But there was a point during the fire when they couldn't contain them. And a fire captain said, look, when you can't contain a fire, you have two priorities: rescue people and hold the perimeter. And I feel like as the church, that's where we are. Rescue people wherever possible, hold the perimeter, try not to allow them to separate children from their parents, figure out what the bottom line is that you can defend and defend that. And when I say rescue people, I don't just mean physically through helping them perhaps find a new place to live or legal support, although legal support will be of minimal use from what they're saying. But, we should still look at it, right? There are places where people can fight legally. So there will be those kinds of things, but there's also spiritual and support. There's also trauma-informed care where we try to help people hold on to well-being and shalom in whatever way they can, individually and together, to hold on to their relationship with the Christ who overcomes sin, death, and the devil, and get some comfort and strength and support in the midst. So every one of our monthly webinars starts with a spiritual reflection that is designed to help people with anxiety and depression. So we really recognize that the church has that role as well.
And how do they get connect to this, Dr. Alexa?
So, and then I mentioned that there are 3 networks. The Evangelical Immigration Network is still alive and well. They're primarily focused on refugees. That's really their core concern, but they have a strong network, and they have a strong network in terms of accurate information. So Evangelical Immigration Table, La Iglesia que acompaña al migrante, which if somebody's interested in getting more information about that, they should contact me. And then this New Sanctuary Movement through Church World Service.
And how would they contact you to get the information?
Well, I'm at Fuller Theological Seminary, so it's really easy to find me. I'm right there. You can get
Fuller.edu.
Yeah, fuller.edu. I'm right there in the faculty. Alexia Salvatierra at fuller.edu. And so anybody can find me if they want to. And I'm happy to connect you up. La Iglesia que acompaña al migrante. Our webinars are in Spanish, but we always have translation into English if people want them. But really, we're focused on our community. And if English is your dominant language, you really may want to get connected with the New Sanctuary Movement, which is through Church World Service.
And look, and this is a community work that you're talking about, that the church and anybody can be doing it, because obviously at the legal standpoints, we're going to have some restraints going forward. So I really appreciate you being able to come in and just remind us, particularly the church, as we're thinking about this, what we can do to engage in what seems to be inevitable. It's just at what level it's going to do that. So man, Alexia, always excited to get you in here and appreciative of your time. And you have said it. I know that the fires have affected a lot of our friends out there in Pasadena, and obviously we've had professors that have lost their homes and things.
Lost their homes.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
others of us, we have friends staying with us who lost their home, and a number of us who didn't lose our homes have friends staying with us indefinitely. Yeah. And then we also have keep us in prayer. The winds are coming back today. And where these extremely dangerous winds are coming back today for another 2 days. So we don't know what's going to happen.
It seems like it's like you said, it's a fire everywhere, and we find ourselves fighting on lots of different fronts, and so we're So thankful for just the front that you continue to battle on with the church in the midst of this conversation. So, Alexia, always good to talk to you. Thanks for jumping in. Again, our prayers are with you, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you for doing this, for giving us an opportunity,
Absolutely.
all of us, for a different voice to be heard, a different voice
No, I
in the
love it.
church and of the church to be heard. So may
Got it.
God bless
Well,
us
thank
all.
you. We'll talk to you the next time.
Next time. Okay, sounds good.
All right, bye, Alexia. All right, if anybody's watching, you know that Dr. Trump, I was still caught in the Dr. Alexia
The
mode
great-
here.
the great
Yeah,
Dr.
exactly. Guys, we've got Donald Day Trump who is engaging this conversation. We've got another friend online. It's Monica. I can see you in the green room. Are you watching the inauguration right now? She's like, she's not watching. Can you hold for just? Can you like a few seconds? Yeah, she's great. She knows she's been with her fam. So, those of you who are watching, we've got Donald
he
Trump in
said.
here.
I mean, you're going to want to listen to it. He's talking about the inflation crisis right now. The things you may have missed if you haven't been listening up to this point, particularly with that Dr. Alexis conversation. He thanked Black and Hispanic Americans for voting for him, in reference to, and made a reference to Dr. King. Quote, he said, "Together we will strive to make his dream a reality," and was met with applause. And then he says, "We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God." I think we can put a bookmark there. I think we're probably going to come back to that. After that, he said he's going to declare a state of national emergency at the southern border. He was saying that just as we were talking to Alexis. And that was met with standing ovation and applause, probably the biggest applause moment to this point. Designating the cartels as foreign terrorists is an executive order, and he's going to invoke, I forget the official name, I'm just going to say the Declaration of 1798, which I think is what he's going to use to go and execute these mass deportations. So those are some of the things that we saw. He's talking a little bit about finances in the Green New Deal right now. But
yeah, it's really interesting that the conversation that we're having today, obviously, with lots of folks who are going to be talking about immigration and things of that nature. I know that was a huge platform on which he ran, and obviously the promises that he has made for immigration start now, right? Today, executive orders, all kinds of things. I know, I have a source or a couple of sources in just other different parts of the country who are talking about what people have been doing in ICE, if you will, to get prepared for some of this and some of the things they've been already working on, filling up trucks, making sure maintenance has been done, things of that nature, so that they can, be able to react immediately. So this is a real deal. Like this is not a drill, if you will. This is real. This is going to be happening.
And I think it presents a real challenge to the church. It's going to present a real challenge because there are going to be people who say, regardless of what you feel about Donald Trump, regardless of what you feel about immigration, lives are going to be changed.
Yes.
And there are going to be non-criminal lives that are going to be changed. Right? You may have a thought about criminals. And if you believe, of course, we all believe that criminals should be held accountable to whatever crimes that they have. All criminals.
Right. See you.
But also there is a very real need for God's people to find a way in the middle of all of this to love the neighbor who's being innocently caught up in all of this well. And I think it's just going to be a challenge to do that. It's going to challenge a lot of our right-leaning churches to find a way to agree with the policy that they are supporting through Trump while navigating loving your neighbor well that our Lord and Savior calls us to. And how do we do both?
Yeah, he's just as a transition, he's working on this idea of free speech Obviously, that's opening up the opportunity for people to have conversations via social media that don't have the same restraints as they did before. And I know this next 4 years is going to push us into um, engaging with people we haven't agreed with at a very deep level. So we thought it'd be great to bring in Monica Guzman, who was a part of our Christianity Public Square series and color commentary, to just kind of help us think about that and see where she's thinking about that and what she's planning as she goes forward. Monica, come on in and talk to us. Thank you so much for coming in. I know you've been with your family. You've been kind of sitting with us and watching all this stuff. So thank you for the extra time that you've given us. How are you maneuvering this day? Clearly, you mentioned that you weren't watching the inauguration. Is that true?
I wasn't watching it until I joined the backstage of this show, and then I
Okay.
said, "Sure, let's take a look at what's going on in live chats online and all of that." But most of my day to day will be spent playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends later
There you
today.
go.
Oh
Get in there.
my goodness! You bringing back Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, it's the best.
Wow.
It's back,
I know it's
bro.
been
Yeah.
back, but
It's
I feel like
great.
there's so many other things that people are playing. It's good to see an OG. You know what I'm saying?
Oh no, and it's the best because you're there with friends in person. Is the way we do it. We've played with the same group for 8 years, and you take on these characters who have conflicts and all kind. It builds empathy and perspective like you wouldn't believe. People don't realize that about the game. It's extraordinary for that.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and it's interesting, right? Because we're watching Donald Trump as he's having this conversation and giving his speeches, and there's a whole swath of people who are standing, a whole swath of people who are sitting. When things happen, you can see in their eyes as people stand and agree with him, the excitement and the intensity. But you can also see on the opposite side of those who are sitting, like the same amount of intensity the other way, right? Like how do we? You said before on our show, keep the bridge.
Yeah.
How in the world are we going to keep the bridge with what we know is going to be a circus for the next 4 years?
Yeah.
What are you talking to your people about?
I mean, the answer I have for you now in this moment when you say, how do we keep the bridge? How on earth do we keep a bridge? Is, well, how do we not? This is an extraordinarily divided country whose perceptions of its divisions are exaggerated because of the divisions. We spend so much time projecting onto other people the why of what they believe. And we imagine often the worst. Research has shown this over and over again, and we use that as a reason to stay away. But I think we've gotten to a place after this election where I think it's becoming clear to the blue side, my side, the liberal side, the losing side, that that's not gonna work. If you're on the blue side and you believe in your views, your values, your sense of what the right way would be, disengagement, shame, distance doesn't work. Every burned bridge is one less channel of communication where we can see the truth of what each other actually believes, the softening that could happen when we come together and start to discover the common ground that was always there. And it may seem, especially watching this inauguration, that there is no common ground, but that's not true. That is not true.
Well, he talks to himself about he just said a second ago that he's going to be this peacemaker.
Yes, he said our legacy will his proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker.
Right, which is
language for him.
This is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But at least as we've kind of watched this before, because this is not a new. This is the sequel, right, to the first movie.
Yeah.
And in the first movie, there was not peace as far as conversations. I mean, Braver Angels, the work that you guys were doing, I mean, it was elevated in this time, right? Like we needed it more than ever. I'm wanting to be positive, right? I wanted to be excited about this and wanting to see how that moves forward. But it gets a bit ironic when someone who had a movie that seemed to be about division and about alienating people and speaking negatively about people, how do you become a peacemaker with someone who is unreasonable in their efforts to try to overtake you with their I can't even think of the right words to say, to overtake you with their the words that they say and the negative things they say about you. Like, how do you enter into a conversation with someone like that? Do you have any tools for us on that?
Yeah, I mean, the answer in the case of Trump and this administration, I don't know. But I can tell you that I hope he's right, because we desperately need that. We need stability. We need peace. It's been wacky. So I leave my mind open there. Now, how you engage with folks who, in your perspective, have have had this track record of contempt, attack, divisive rhetoric. A lot of the times when we run into those folks in our lives, that reaction on the part of other people has a reason for being there. Sometimes people go to that reaction, that lashing out, that contempt, because they believe a story they've told themselves, that it's the only way that they will be heard. It's the only way they will make an impact. And so I think one of the ways you engage with folks like that is to prove them wrong. Prove that they can be heard when they are not engaging in that kind of rhetoric. Show them that they do matter, their perspectives do matter, even if they've had that history. Now, that takes a lot of foolish courage and patience, because why would you do that, right? Like, it's just better to push them off and say no. Now, the other thing, and this is really tricky, but this is also a podcast that is spiritual in its nature, and we have to bring humility into this, because so often we paint the villain and then the saint, right? I've never done that. No, I'd never hold people who disagree with me in contempt. I've never shamed. So I'm going to talk to you as I'm the saint, you're the devil. And part of what's happened in our divisions is that we paint the other side as the devil. Then there's this like constant just, it's my turn and I'm going to squish you. And now it's my turn. I'm going to squish you. And that's not a country I want to live in. So It's tricky because all different types of people will default to different reactions and different personalities. And some folks will default to some really ugly stuff. Really ugly stuff. And sometimes, look, the right answer is absolutely disengagement. The right answer is absolutely no tolerance, get away from me. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes somebody has to break that cycle.
Ooh, that is a big ask.
Yeah.
Now you were making a differentiation between obviously Donald Trump and others, and obviously there are plenty of people out there who have adopted his rhetoric and adopted his style.
Yeah.
Now I think what you're believing and what we're believing too is that is the extreme of this Republican Party. Although I'm sure there's plenty of people who are still clapping and having to love what he's having to say right now on television. But yet what I am hoping, and maybe this is the Pollyanna aspect of it, is that there is a large group of people who represent the blue and represent the red that will not come at these conversations with the extreme language. Yeah. Like they actually desire to be in relationship with one another. Yes. And in fact, there are many people whose houses are filled with people who represent blue and red. There are people in churches that are blue and red. And for them to be able to come to the, I'll call it center for now, for able to come to the center for conversation, cross borders, cross boundaries, to do that, they got to believe that there's something that they can unite around. And so obviously in the church, we talk about it in terms of Jesus and the gospel and things of that nature. And even that gets convoluted at times. Yeah. But generally, as we listen to Donald Trump, we're all watching, if we are watching, with this unity as Americans.
Yeah.
And to your point that you said earlier, to not engage is to further a divide.
Yes. It is
and
the
to
most
create the
un-American.
inevitable.
It's the most un-American thing. The disengage and the shaming is the most un-American thing that we could possibly do. I'm reading right now a book called American Covenant about the Constitution, written by Yuval Levin, this incredible scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and it is really bringing home to me how far we've strayed in the recent era with the balance of the checks and balances of our system. Our Congress is supposed to be the legislative body. It wasn't meant to be where a president would do a ton of executive orders at the beginning of their administration and direct the country quite so much from the executive branch. It's something about the polarization and the division, something about the attention economy, how the winners of our political contests, it seems to be that the number one criteria for winning is, can you command attention? Now, when you command attention, you get your agenda, you get all that. You got to please your base, right? You've got to please your base. Trump knows how to do that. And frankly, lots of politicians do on all sides. That's the people who get rewarded. And you also end up mischaracterizing the issues on the table to the detriment of all. You end up exaggerating. You end up going really far to make sure you get the eyeballs. And then to your point earlier, you were saying, I'm sure that there are folks in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, there are houses with people who are not using divisive rhetoric. 100,000%. That is the lion's share of us all.
Right.
But the attention that gets concentrated, condensed, and then the policy making that appears to be concentrated and condensed because our legislature doesn't know how to disagree well for the sake of good governance anymore.
Yeah.
We got to look well beyond the executive branch, well beyond what's happening today, to see. We've got to be able to step away from what all the news and all the media and all the politicians want us to do is just focus on the thing today and get outraged and click and share. No, take a step back. We are Americans. This is our country. This is our nation. We get to shape it. No president gets to shape it. They can make us believe that, and it's good for ratings, but it's not actually true. And we're still under that Constitution. And Trump said that he honors that Constitution. All right. Well, guess what? That Constitution was designed to divide us so that we can be united. It was designed, we have all these different elections at tons of different levels. Lots of other democracies are not like this. We have this productive tension between majorities and protecting the minority, between, the states and the federal. It is a masterclass in checks. But every single place in our system and in our infrastructure where there's that collision, the friction is actually necessary. It is by design. It is the most un-American thing to disengage.
Whew. That's really well said. And hard to fully hear, obviously, because you're going to be working with a dungeon master or whatever that is that's made your whole story up, and you've got to deal with whatever they tell you to do, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like in
It's what it feels like, but it's not what's happening. It's just what it feels like. I'm serious. The dungeon master actually is God. It's my husband.
Yeah, no doubt.
The dungeon master actually does make all the rules, but that's not what's going on. It only feels
that's right. That is only in the D&D worlds and those kinds of role play areas, right? But we live in a democracy in which it has been created that should not happen. So everything that we're supposed to be experiencing and watching as we make this transfer of power, you're going to spend the rest of your day dealing in what everybody thinks is going to happen. That there's a dungeon master doing it, right? Exactly.
It's gonna be fun.
I love it. Hey, this is good, Monica. I don't want to keep you from your elves and dwarves and all the things that
we need.
I'm a barbarian. I'm a barbarian.
She's about to answer. Okay. I was just about to say we need to know what kind of character she is.
I was gonna jump in. It's a barbarian named Shadrach. He's awesome. He's amazing. And he's all like, yeah. So that's gonna be my attitude today. We're gonna.
Oh, you ready?
Okay.
I'm ready.
Right.
Let's go.
All right, we in it. We need a report.
Okay.
On
I'll let
how
you
these
know.
things go. Yeah, fill it in.
Oh my gosh.
That'll
I'll
be
let you know
what's
how
up.
many beasts we slay.
That's
Thank
right.
you
That's
all.
right.
It's going
I
down
love
for
it.
real.
Man, Monty, thank you for coming in. I know you've been with your family. I know you got some good D&D to do. Thank you for giving us the insights. You know, what you got for us is always hard,
Yeah.
but so much what we need to hear as we go forward.
All right,
Thank you
y'all.
for all the work that you and Braver Angels do. And if you guys are not connected with Monica, check out braverangels.org.
Let's go.
Yeah, there's conversations happening around you right now.
Yes.
I know we have one happening even tonight in our area. So be on the lookout for that. Get on their mailing list, so you can find out when conversation go in there and have more of these opportunities to deal with the people who are the vast majority of our country who want to come together and have these conversations. So this is good. Monty, thank you. Have a good day. We'll see you next time. Okay.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
All right. Carrie Underwood's
That's
in the
right.
house singing her song, America the Beautiful. Not
Is it her song?
Not her
It's
song.
not-
Her
not her
singing,
song,
having
no.
her moment. I'm sure it sounds lovely. I can't hear it all of it. She's a great singer. She's taking a lot of flack for.
You stop talking on over it. You know what I mean?
joining us.
Like we just, we got you there.
It's over now.
It's over
done.
now. That's
done,
we've
yeah.
done it. It's
That's it.
oh,
It's
she's
finished.
giving applause to everybody.
That's right. She's like, that's an easy song. I can do that one.
Oh, they all stood up. What Carrie Underwood is our place of unity in this country. It's the first time in the last 15 minutes that everybody has stood
Everybody stood at the same time.
for America the Beautiful.
Okay.
I know we got Stephen Reeves in the green room. Hey, Stephen, good to see you. We'll bring you in just a second. Antoine, did you have some updates from the speech that you wanted to? Stephen, you're watching this, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's watching it. All right. So I'm going to bring him in and we can update and Stephen can engage with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring Stephen Reeves into the room with Fellowship Southwest. If you watched our Christianity Public Square, you saw Stephen. He has a history of in law and lobbying. They're doing some great work around the border right now at Fellowship Southwest. So excited to have him in here and all those folks who are with him. So Stephen, Antoine's going to give us some updates on some of the rhetoric from Trump here in his speech. Feel free to jump in as you go. What did we miss while we were talking that we need to engage, Antoine?
Yeah. I just wrote a few of his quotes down, and I think the speech was really interesting. There's just a lot of interesting things he said. So here's one of the things he says: we will not only be measured by the battles we win, but the wars we end. I thought that was interesting. You mentioned with our last guest, our legacy will be that of a peacemaker. That's what Trump says. Of course, he wants to change Gulf of Mexico to Gulf America. I don't know if that's really all that notable, but
it's pretty notable.
I guess it feels like
every
like
map
flex
in the world, like we got to redo maps and things for.
It's a weird flex, as far as I'm concerned.
It's a super weird flex.
This was really interesting. He said we will pursue our manifest destiny, and I think he was talking about heading into Mars, but it was interesting to use the terminology manifest destiny. Say he wants to put a flag on Mars. So it's interesting that he would use that language.
It's very intentional language.
And then ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. I think that's a discussion point. The spirit of the frontier is written on our soul. And then he began to recount a very opportunistic view of American history and the taking over of the continent as untamed lands, and he just kind of left out the genocide. And then he went to bring a spirit of unity in a world that has been angry and violent. That's what he said he wanted to do, while also saying we won't back down and sounding rather, in my opinion, angry and violent. So those are some of the things I saw. I think it's some things that we could keep going, and I'm very interested in hearing if you guys listen to the speech. What are some of the things that stood out to you? So post that into the comment section. And Stephen, did you get a chance to hear it all? And what stood out to you?
Well, I was trying to listen to a little bit of your previous guest and the speech at the
Yeah.
same time, and so a little bit hard to hear much of. First of all, thanks. I'm really happy to be with y'all. Thanks for the invitation. With our work at Fellowship Southwest, I'm really paying attention to what this administration, the new policies would probably mean for the border. And so I understand he, declared a state of emergency at the border. I'll be very interested to see what that means to him and what the changes are. I think that a lot of folks can agree how folks have been coming, and the state of the border is not optimal from anybody's perspective. But I'm pretty concerned about further militarization, and that's a lot what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, I think he wants to reenact the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. I think that's going to be an official thing he's doing in that area. And he also mentioned the labeling the cartel as terrorists, as let's see, what's the word here? Foreign terrorists.
That's really interesting to me. I want to talk about that a second because so many of the people that we see and that our ministries minister to on the border are the people fleeing the cartel, right?
Yeah.
They're leaving their country, usually, Central South America, sometimes Mexico, because of the cartel violence in their town. And so the only pathway they've had has been to sort of run and get here and try to claim asylum, right? Through the CBP One app or whatever they can do. But being a victim of cartel violence is not a reason you can get asylum. But on the other hand, if the government's now saying these are terrorist organizations, and that they're controlling these countries, then it seems like that would be a real good reason to give somebody asylum. And so it's kind of a little bit of an interesting catch-22, because right now we don't say that you can claim asylum because you've been a victim of cartel violence. But now if you're saying, hey, your enemy is my enemy, I'm coming because the people you just said are terrorist organizations, people ought to be thinking about a different pathway to asylum for that reason.
Now, hold up. I just want to take a second here, just to pause, because if anybody's watching the inauguration right now, we've got Reverend Sewell, who is ultimately recreating the last parts of the I Have a Dream speech from Dr. Martin Luther King, with a lot of his drama as well. Just I know I'm cutting in the middle of this a little bit, Stephen.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm not excited about this.
Well, such complicated feelings.
It's a super complicated feeling right now.
It feels the facial expression of Donald Trump feels patronizing.
I think the whole thing,
and I'm not trying to target, I'm just saying, as I look at it, he's looking at him and he's like, do your little thing.
Well, I think the whole thing feels patronizing, particularly given even what Stephen's talking about. Right. I think there's so much of what Dr. King was really about that was not obviously just around African-American rights, but it was civil rights. It was really engaging the issues of not only Black community, but really all communities, all ethnic communities. He's, when we started Threaded, it was a very diverse group, and many of them had their stories about what Dr. King's work meant to them. And in fact, I can thinking about one of our friends who was Chinese, and he talks about this idea that it was the work that Dr. King and the civil rights movement did that broke down the ban on the Chinese Immigration Act, that ultimately allowed now his family to come over from China in 1968 with the new immigration bill. And here we are in the midst of, as Dr. Alexia talked about earlier, and Steve, you can probably attest to this, the sequel to a president who demonstrated that he had some of the most stringent and I don't even know how to call it. One of the most stringent laws around immigration, and Dr. King is being sort of called out in the midst of it. It feels like extremely ironic in the midst of that. So
it's just really hard. It's hard to. There seems to be two competing philosophies that are trying to be melded together
here
that they don't feel correctly melded, and that's why the feeling it's hard to on 1 minute say, hey, we're gonna separate these people from us while also
drawing on somebody who's drawing people to us.
Yeah.
I don't, Stephen.
I mean, I just gotta say, from essentially the beginning of our immigration policy, it has been racialized. Absolutely. Chinese Exclusionary Act, right? And that's evident just throughout our history, but it's particularly evident with this president, right? I mean, he started his entire campaign calling people coming up from the South racists and murderers and drug dealers. And, just if that's not, racism, just saying these people are all bad, it's pretty hard to figure out a different definition. And on top of that, then he said, we don't want people from S-hole countries, right? Remember that? I mean, that is just, what do those all have in common? Right. And so I'm with you. It is sort of the height of whitewashing MLK to have that right there, in my opinion. I think if you think about King talking about the isms, that he was fighting capitalism, militarism, racism. I don't know, kind of a better poster boy for capitalism and militarism than perhaps this incoming president. And so, I'm with y'all. It's hard to, the feeling in the pit of the stomach is hard to explain. And especially hard to explain if somebody else doesn't have it when they're seeing that, right? It's rough, man.
I think that's one of the hardest pieces. This feeling that you're feeling right now and that we're all feeling, at least here on this call, is exactly what I remember from the first movie. Like having every day. And I think we forget this constant barrage that we're about to get into of these things that are being said from the leader of the country and from those around him that seem to challenge, for at least my opinion, some of the foundational aspects of what it means to love your neighbor. And it's of course what we're seeing here is we just saw multiple religious leaders, and particularly I know we had Christian leaders, right? Franklin Graham, we had this reverend who was just doing the MLK sort of reboot. And we are party to this, right? Like we are with this, we are supporting this, and it's really rough to experience. To be reminded that this is the experience that we're going to be having for a little bit.
I live in this world where even in church, away from politics, I get frustrated at doing the right things or saying the right things at the right time simply because society or the environment dictates that it should be said, as opposed to something that feels driven and authentic and real and passionate, right? And so I'm like that in church anyway, where we do things and we say things. I don't know that we always mean what we say, but we certainly know that we're supposed to say those things at any given moment. And it drives me crazy when we do that. I hate the show. I hate any aspect of showing like that. And so when I have a guy that stands up here who I'm sure that preacher believes in Martin Luther King, and his goal was to properly represent in a dramatic and passionate way what Dr. King means. And yet for me, it just landed like, we're just going to give this guy a chance to do this because today's MLK Day, and nothing about what we're going to do is really going to be informed, by the concepts that Dr. King truly stood for. And Trump mentioned it. He mentions MLK in his speech as well. Right. So he's saying these things, but I don't know, man. I just don't like it feels disingenuous and inauthentic, and I just have a problem with it.
Yeah, I believe that for sure. And obviously we're gonna have more of that, and particularly in the next couple of weeks, days, whatever it may be, we're gonna see the part that makes us feel odd at work, as he deals with those who are immigrants. What are you guys prepping for, Stephen, on your side of your work here?
Well, a few things, and I want to come back to the word you used a second ago and say, in the big picture, I'm trying to prepare for that constant barrage that you just talked about,
Yeah,
and it's such a tension. I wrote about this for our Fellowship Southwest folks, where you've got, on the one hand, the sort of need to not be pulled by every single comment and every single tweet or X, and like the day-to-day can be so overwhelming with this constant barrage of things that get you in your feelings, and like you just want to lash out. But this is a long haul, we got
yeah,
4 years. And so I think there's this tension between, going back to King, he talked about the arc of the moral universe is long but bends towards
right,
justice. And so
right.
on the one hand, I'm thinking about, okay, this is long, I got to stay in it, I got to be prepared for the long haul. But then also he talked about the fierce urgency of now,
Oh no,
right?
yeah,
And so that's just like, I'm feeling that tension a whole lot. Like, how do I not get burned out? How do I not let his words dictate what we do as an organization, or my feelings personally, and be ready for that long haul struggle? And so that's kind of where I am today. I will say, on the border, we're I think we're preparing for a few things with our partners, and I don't know kind of which way it's going to go. I think a lot of times in the past, I've had ideas of what a policy change will mean for the migrant flow, and I've been wrong. And so on the one hand, I think it's possible that people really, if CBP One app goes away and there's like no real way to access asylum, maybe folks will stop coming to a certain degree, and maybe we will have less flow, less numbers. And right, we've seen that a little bit in the last few months. Some of the shelters are not as full. On the other hand, I mean, people are fleeing for their lives, and whether or not an app is working or there's a legal pathway, they're going to come anyway. And in like the first Trump administration, the shelters fill way up, and the need for us to support goes way up. I will say, one of our main partners that's on the U.S. side, most of them are in Mexico, but one on the U.S. side has been sending me messages he's been getting from the people he's been working with over the last 4 years with the Department of Homeland Security, saying, thanks for all you've done, Pastor. Thanks for how you've helped these folks. I'm resigning effective Monday. I hope to see you around, And
Wow.
so the massive shift in personnel is going to be interesting to watch as well. And then, we're thinking about our churches that we know that serve immigrant communities far from the border, and thinking about, okay, what's the flow going south? What is this? What are
Yeah.
these mass deportations really going to mean? And how can we be present with those families, present with those folks as that likely happens?
Yeah, Stephen, you're doing some really great work, and obviously talking in terms of where the church is and where Fellowship Southwest is. I'd love if I can merge a conversation here. Do you have a half second? You running someplace
Yeah, I'm
right
good.
now?
No, I'm
Okay,
good.
I want to bring in a good friend of ours who is actually an immigration lawyer in Houston, just to kind of get into this conversation with us a little bit, because I think it'll be
You
fun
bet.
to kind of see somebody who's kind of on the ministry side, obviously been in the lobby side, but who's right on the front. So anybody who's been a friend of Color Commentary has engaged with Alice K, and K Immigration has been one of our sponsors as well for when we did Christianity Public Square. So I'm just going to bring in Alice K into the space to talk. Alice, you're down in Houston. Hello, welcome. Good to see you.
What's up, Alice?
Hi. Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, Alice,
So
nice to
obviously
meet
you guys are you were hearing a little bit about what Stephen Reeves was talking about. I saw some head nodding from you in different ways, particularly as he was talking about flow and deportation. What were you hearing, and how does that connect with the work that you do down in Houston?
Yeah, so I didn't hear the whole conversation, but
Yeah, sure.
when I chimed in, I was hearing Stephen make some of the points that I feel very strongly about and I was planning on making. So we have a little
Good, we'll
private
double it
chat
up.
going. Yeah, we have a little private chat going. I was like, this Stephen guy knows what he's talking about. I had no idea he was going to read it.
Appreciate
I thought
that.
it was private. So there you go, Stephen. Props to you.
Well, thank you.
One of the things that you mentioned that I kind of want to, make a point about is you talked about your organization is helping people who are fleeing the cartels. Like that's the reason a lot of them are coming to the United States and seeking protection and asylum is because they are fleeing these people that now Trump is saying he's designating as terrorist organizations. I think it's, I have mixed feelings about that because legally we don't know how it's going to play out yet. I definitely think these cartels a lot of times act like terrorist organizations, and we do need to have some increased things that happen in the United States to protect from that incursion, and how it affects our people, how it affects, across borders. I do think we need to take them more seriously because, they're kind of running rampant. But what makes me nervous about that is, like you mentioned, a lot of these people, good people, they're not getting help in their home countries. The cartels are running amok. The cartels are acting like terrorist organizations, taking down families, churches, organizations, communities. And they have no option but to flee. And then a lot of them feel they have no option except to come north and, to try to come to the United States to seek protection in the form of asylum. And I also want to agree with you that fleeing cartels is not the basis for granting asylum in the United States. And so you're right. Everything that you said about where does that leave us, that's where me as an immigration lawyer, we get nervous. Where does that leave us? And then also, Trump mentioned this Alien Enemies Act of 1798. I mean, I heard it on the campaign trail and I Googled it then, but I'm looking at it today and, getting a little more information. It's one of those things that you're like, surely that's not actually going to happen. But it was one of the very first things he mentioned. I mean, immigration was his first point in his inauguration speech today. And this was one of the things he brought up. And this act back in 1798, I mean, that's what they used. They've used it 3 times in American history: the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. And this is it's most famously known for the Japanese, internment camps.
Right.
And basically it grants the president power to detain, relocate, and remove from the United States any non-citizen from a specific country that he has designated, either during a specific declared period of time of war that requires Congress approval, or during approval or what the president calls an invasion, which is the language he used in his acceptance speech today. And that does not require congressional approval. So legally, he can invoke this act without congressional approval that gives him the power to do these things. And it's not got a great track record in American history. And it doesn't seem in sync with some of the other language we heard about, Martin Luther King and unity. And like you guys were talking about, it seems like there were kind of some things that are a little bit different.
Not even a little bit different. That's a lot different. I mean, that's the crazy part is, as we're going to go through the next 4 years, as we did the previous time he was in office, there's going to be this desire, because the rhetoric is so outrageous, to try to position it in a rational place. And I don't believe anymore that that's fully where that exists. And we're going to need, I think, really good workers in this space to be constantly calling that out, right? The term of, obviously, truth telling is such a big piece of what everybody wants to talk about. We've got to start telling the truth about what these things are. We've got to continue to educate, right? Like there's plenty of people who listened to the inauguration speech today, and so they heard this act of 1798 and they're like, oh, that's interesting, what's that, right? And not understanding like the ways that it was utilized in history, and there's plenty of people who won't even care about that. And it's that constant thing that we've talked about, is like, who are we high-fiving in history, right? As we look back in our historical narrative, are these the things we're proud of?
Right.
Is this what we're proud of? That the ways we've used the Act of 1798 most recently for Japanese immigration, is this what we're proud of? Is that what we want to put forward in this?
Yeah.
And it's so sad. Like, and you said it, Alice, and we've said it already. Like, to know the way that has been used historically, to know that that's how he started his speech, and to have that happen not only on a day that is also choosing to honor Dr. Martin Luther King and all the work that he did around the civil rights movement, but to also have his name uttered in the same speech, and have a Black pastor being put on stage to dramatically deliver arguably one of the softest speeches that King ever gave. But the one that everybody wants to quote today, right? But completely forgetting to quote later stuff around, you know, how he thought about Vietnam and the poverty and militarization, right? Like all of that. Like it's so sad, because we're sitting here in this call and we're going, this seems weird, right? But other people have no context in which to think through that.
No, it's because the we, when Donald Trump says we, I think we're all hearing different people. When he says we are going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do that, we're like, who are you talking about? And that's what makes it feel unsafe. I think difficult, because on the one hand, it feels like he draws very clear distinctions about us and them across a variety of social contexts, whether it's immigrants, whether it's those who voted for him and those who didn't, whether it's the blue state or the red state. You know, he just draws these us and them lines, and yet he stands and gives a speech and he continues to say, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to have, like, who are your promises for? And it makes it feel, I don't know.
Well, and I'm thinking about it in terms of like with you, Alice, like you're dealing with the immigrant community, and not all of them, or should I say, and some of them are all in on what Donald Trump is talking about, right?
Yes, that's exactly. I mean, I think I mentioned this to you guys just recently, but yeah, that's exactly the point that I was about to make is, you know, even, you know, families that come to see me, you know, I have a mix. I have people that are here lawfully and people who are here not lawfully that are seeking, you know, lawful status. But, you know, he got a lot more of the Hispanic vote than last time. And that was increasing. And when, you know, my people that I interact with here, you know, as clients or potential clients, a lot of them surprisingly are very pro-Trump. And so I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, because you have some people with this rhetoric that Trump is anti-immigrant, Trump is anti-Hispanic, Trump is anti-this, anti-that. But at the same time, we have a lot of these population groups that are increasingly voting for him. And so we have to really come to grips as a society. Why is that happening? What is it that he's saying that is appealing to, you know, these groups? And one of the things, you know, that we see is, I don't think that anybody, you know, red or blue, can really with a straight face say that there's no problem at the southern border. I think everybody really understands that things have gotten out of control. It puts Americans at risk if we don't know who's entering and who's not. We do know that because the southern border is known for being so easy to cross illegally, that people from other countries who are from, you know, previously designated terrorist organizations will enter the United States through the southern border. So we know that other countries, are using the southern border to enter the United States illegally. We know that. And so why is it, so everybody kind of agrees we've got to do something about this. So then what do we do? And to see Trump, kind of, fall on this Alien Enemies Act of 1798, it's like, well, is that what we want to do? Is it really what we want to do if you're declaring an invasion from the southern border? Our southern neighbor is Mexico. So are you seriously saying that anyone whose nationality or alienage or citizenship is Mexican is now at risk? Is that really what we want to say? Is that, there's all kinds of constitutional questions that come on, equal protection, due process, everything else. How is this appealing to those, and how is this solving the problem? Also, there are things that can and should be done. And maybe it's just, his advisors have said, look, we've got this power. This is the fastest way we can use it. Let's do it. But it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out and what that's going to look like.
Yeah,
It's
and
very.
And as we're watching President Biden and Joe Biden leave on I forget Marine probably 2 or Marine 1 or 2, depends on what you're going to use, but they're leaving out. It's just a reminder of what happened 4 years ago, where this scene did not take place. We did not have a outgoing president that's doing a peaceful transfer of power, but rather we were in we were still feeling the the effects of January 6th and all the things that were going on there. But thinking about the outgoing administration and thinking about the incoming administration from your perspective, what are the things that Trump's saying? Are they going to make things better? Are we in such a bad situation on the southern border right now that we're going to see a drastic change into this new administration?
I think we can anticipate some pretty drastic changes. I made some notes, from his speech today. And like I mentioned, the very first topic he talked about was immigration. He immediately said he's declaring a national emergency at the southern border. He is, stopping all illegal entries immediately. He's returning criminal aliens. He is reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy, ending catch and release, putting troops in the southern border to deter an invasion, designating cartels as a foreign terrorist org, the Alien Enemies Act, but he said he was using it to target gangs in the United States. And just, kind of making all of these things, these were the main points that he was saying he's bringing up day one via executive order. I think we can see and expect some immediate changes. I think that we can anticipate increased removals very soon. Here in Houston, we have numerous buses that execute removal orders to Mexico on a daily basis. We've heard, those of us in the community here have heard, all the buses have been serviced, their contracts with private airline carriers are being, reviewed and making sure everything is current. These are just things that we're hearing. I don't know if all of that is true. We think it is, but I think that we can immediately expect that there are going to be more removals in the very near future. One of the things that I have seen is that a lot of people who have what are called ICE check-ins, where they're here and maybe they're in court or they have some type of protection or parole or something, they may have to report to ICE just as a check-in. Hey, this is where I live. I'm still here, whatever. A lot of those have been by an app or you'll get a link and you have to click a link and take a picture of yourself, like, hey, this is where I am. But we're seeing an increase in in-person appointments, demands for in-person appointments. And so a lot of us are preparing our clients like, hey, look, you need to prepare yourself and your family. There's a possibility you show up for that appointment, they're going to detain you.
Wow.
And you're not going home. And so get your affairs in order. We just have to be diligent. And I always tell my clients, I'm going to respect you enough to tell you the truth, good, bad, or ugly. You know, I may be able to help you, I may not be, but you've got to know the risks that you're taking so that you can get your affairs in order and prepare your family.
Man, that's really hard to hear, and I know can probably be terrifying for such a large portion of that community, particularly down in Houston. I know, and as we hear that, you know, we can kind of, you know, circle up on this conversation, if you will, just kind of as I know, Alice, obviously you and I have known each other forever. I know that you are deeply connected to this work via your faith. Obviously, Stephen, that's the work that you're doing as well. To help us understand, Stephen, maybe this is for you. Why should the church care anything about what Alice just said? Like, how are you guys communicating that?
You know, if there's a consistent thread throughout Scripture, it's people on the move, right? I mean, it is hard to find any place in Scripture to argue about welcome the stranger and love your neighbor. And this is right to the core of what I think the gospel is about, and back to the Old Testament, right? I mean, God calls people to move for all kinds of reasons, and we have a lot of people needing to move right now. And I think it is a confluence of that aspect of our faith and what I think to be the best aspects of American history and society, of being a refuge. Are we still going to be that place that welcomes people who are persecuted? And it kind of doesn't sound like it. And that's a real problem for me personally, because I think being a place that welcomes those who have been persecuted or in trouble or threat of violence, I mean, that's a place where my faith and what I feel called to do by Scripture has aligned with American history in places and times, not always, but the best of us it has. And so that's where I think we are. And I think that there is so much that the church can do and does do to minister to these folks every day. I want to mention one other thing, just to put it out there to make sure your listeners know. I mean, one, whatever is happening is going to happen in Texas. Our state government is eager to participate, likely internment camps, right? I mean, so if we're in Texas, we should be ready for that. And two, one other thing that I haven't seen come across any news or chat yet, but ICE has had in place something called a sensitive locations memo for years now, which says we're not going to go pursue somebody to try and, you know, detain them for deportation if they're in a school, hospital, or church. Right now, the latest news was that Trump is going to do away with that. So if you've got a church serving migrants and you don't check their documentation, you don't know whether they're undocumented or not, but they're coming for food pantry or whatever, maybe even legal help. If they know ICE can just come right into your church now, that's a different feeling for them, perhaps. And so I think when it comes to religious liberty, then that's something I think we're going to want to pay real close attention to, is how do we treat ministries who are ministering to people who might be undocumented.
Man, good convo. In the beginning of more, I'm sure. It's so good to know that folks like you, you two are in this work and able to help. In one case, Alice, I know you're kind of helping in the space that's not necessarily specifically around the church, but right there at the front, right at the legal space. And Stephen, you continuing that work of the legal, but also specifically really trying to help the church engage with that. So I'm so grateful for both of your ministries, because that's what you're both doing for sure. And anything that you guys need, you know, we're here to throw your stuff out there, to participate and to engage. And so so excited about that. Obviously, if anybody's watching this and they are in the Houston area, particularly looking for some help around this immigration work, you can obviously check out Alice at k-immigration.com. And for those of you, like you said, Stephen, you're in Texas. This is a big space. Obviously, those even surrounding areas, the New Mexicos, the Oklahomas, the Louisianas, the Arkansas, right? We're going to see a lot of movement towards that border, and we need to be led by those who are in the ministry engaging this. So definitely can check it out at Fellowship Southwest, fellowshipsouthwest.org. Get involved in a border trip and all the things that are coming along with that. So Alice and Stephen, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge. I know our listeners are really happy for that. So thank you guys for coming in, and we'll be in contact later.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
See you later. All right.
Okay.
That's some heavy stuff right there. I know as we've been talking about this, we spent a lot of time on engaging the immigration piece, which I think is absolutely number one on the list for Trump as he's starting to go forward. He has already engaged that. I want to take a time in our time left here. I mean, we've obviously got people on the stream who may want to engage and talk and put their comments in there. I want to just kind of explore, because of the background that we have and what we do in the Christianity, culture, and race. I want to kind of explore some of the language that we heard inside the speech of the inauguration that may really be pinpointed in the areas of race that we tend to talk about, and just to engage us on that convo and see what our listeners have to feel. So I don't know, Antoine, what did you hear or been seeing that we can kind of start this convo off with?
Wow. To start it off, I thought it was, well, where race is concerned, I thought it was the standout is this manifest destiny word.
Sure.
Just that he would choose that language.
That's the piece, right? Because it
or
is
the writer would choose it. He probably didn't choose it.
You don't think Trump's looking at all his speeches and being like, no, this word out, this word in?
Well, the reason that's so interesting to me is because when we bring that up, when we've brought it up in the past, it's always treated like, yeah, we thought that, but that's not how it is now, right?
What are you talking about?
Like, well, manifest destiny.
Oh, okay.
Like, you're like, well, even if it is, when I've had conversations and I say, hey, America was built with this concept of manifest destiny going on,
doctrine of discovery,
all that. It always, the way it seems to land at the end of the conversation is like, well, maybe that's how it started, but that's not what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And for him to resurrect that language in this moment, even if it isn't associated with race, a particular race, even if it's not associated with Earth, like it's Mars, it still is indicative of a mindset that says we, America, are God's people designed to govern all of God's things. Now we're moving from the land across the sea to the planet across space, that we, God's chosen creation, are supposed to take over and deal with and manage these things. And if that's the mindset that we're working from, then that puts the responsibility squarely in the Christian spaces to deal with that mindset and to unravel it, because that's a dangerous mindset.
Yeah, we dealt with this, I don't know, back in May or so when Biden and Trump were kind of doing speeches, and we kind of brought this idea around dog whistles, right, and pandering. And one of the things we articulated, particularly as we got to the end of it, talking about where Donald Trump was, and really both were doing it, but looking at Donald Trump, which we were like, this language is not accidental, right? There's an intentionality. These guys are smart, right? They're not just going out and writing speeches and not analyzing every word and how they hit into their
they're
audience.
dog whistles.
They're dog whistles.
Yeah.
And throughout this speech, it seems like the dog whistles are all around this sort of antiquated conversation, this historical conversation around race.
Yeah.
The fact that we just spent, several minutes talking about this Act of 1798, which we know, like, of some of the major historical injustices that we bring up in the conversation around race, the Japanese internment camp is one of the top ones because because the excuse me, the United States imprisoned its own citizens in the midst of this World War II encampment. And really, they don't even call it encampment. It is I forget it. I'm losing the word all the time. It's a refugee camp. I'll get the word later. But this language is very intentional.
Yeah.
It is. It's scary.
Yeah.
How intentional the language.
Yeah. What's scary about it, even later in the speech where he says, I think I wrote the quote, frontier, the spirit of the frontier is written on our soul. First of all, who's our?
Right.
What it makes me think is that the historic white man, and this is not just America, it feels like the historic white man has an appetite for, we would normally say, colonization.
Sure.
But this appetite for
Exploration.
imperialism, expansion, domination, and control. And it's been that instinct that has produced slavery, genocide, a series of, if you will, it's the first domino in many ways, maybe not the first domino, but one of the first dominoes that falls on top of these others.
Sure.
And what it sounded like in this speech is that he wants to resurrect this frontier instinct. And that sounds like we want to go and take over spaces.
Yeah.
We want to go and claim more spaces. I think that's dangerous. I think that, to me, is what's dangerous, because he's like, either you're with us and we're going to go and dominate the world and take whatever we want, Greenland, change
Panama.
the Gulf, right? Panama. Like, we're going to take spaces because that's who we are. I have an appetite for growing my empire, my imperialist instinct. I have a God-given right to take Christianity to new spaces through the means of colonization and imperialism. And it seems like that's the blood that he's tasting. And if it's not saying it overtly, although I think the spirit of the frontier.
I think this is super overt right now. His first executive order is going to be changing the name of Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. He is already claiming spaces for the country by the swipe of a pen.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So you're right. So it's overt. And so it's a soft way to say the spirit of the frontier. That makes it sound adventurous. We're going to go into unclaimed, barren lands and we're going to make it something. No, there are people there and there are things there. And it was that way in history. And I don't know that I'm not ready to sign up for the role of claiming more land and doing more things through imperial means. But it feels like that's what he's doing. That the motivation for activity seems to be that. And that sounds very, as a Black man, that sounds very American historic white man to do that. Now, to be fair, imperialists and happens all over the country.
Sure.
So
there
are those, the world rather.
Yeah.
So there are other nationalities. There are kings want to expand their territory, right? So colonization is not purely a white thing. But what we've seen here in America, we were supposed to be this safe haven and this protector, not this Napoleon the Great kind of mindset that constantly wants to seize the rest of the world under our control.
Yeah. in the work that I'm just thinking that in the work of the church, we as we move and we go into different spaces, the thing that we haven't been great at is really practicing this idea of contextualization, right? Being able to understand like what's the context we're in and how do we work within that context, as opposed to what I think we've done historically is we've gone into new places and we have tried to change the context to work towards ourselves. I say all that because the term of contextualization is a really important terminology for us to understand as we read and engage this work, as we hear this speech today, because I do think that Donald Trump is very good at contextualization in the sense of intentional contextualization. He knows his audience and he is giving them what they want to hear. And I think that's the scarier part, is that there is an appetite for this kind of rhetoric, for this type of contextualization, where you can get up and you can go, hey, even though in the racial conversation that we've had really the last 15, 20 years or so, this conversation around color blindness is really not a helpful thing. People who are people of color have been saying that over and over again, whether you're Asian or whether you're Indian or whether you're Native American, Black, Hispanic, so on and so forth. We have talked about this idea that based on the fact that God has intentionally created people from all tribes, tongues, and nations, that to bring a society and elevate colorblindness, you are actually erasing the diversity. You are erasing the God-given intentionality of this diversity. And he's saying yes, right? And that's what's been consistent across the first movie and now in the sequel. That is, we are trying to erase this difference in this diversity as if there is something wrong with being able to recognize that people are different and that they have cultural differentiations. And so the question becomes, why is it so important for Donald Trump and those who support Donald Trump, at least those who are vehemently supporting him, why is it so important to erase these differences? Why is it so important to remove conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why is it so important to elevate this concept of a merit-based society? Like, why is that so important? And what we have found is those who have been proponents of these aspects historically tend to bring those concepts into place to protect something else.
Right.
And so the question is, what are they protecting? I'm asking a question, but I have an answer to what they're protecting. And I think they're protecting white supremacy. And it's not even white supremacy as white people as supreme, but the ideal of whiteness they are trying to protect. All the things that have been a proponent of what people would say is American success gets incorrectly connected to this idea of whiteness. And there are many people, even those who have different color skins, who have subscribed to this idealism, this ideology of whiteness. And this ideology brings with it all of these different components and values ultimately that have been self-given. And you have people like the pastor who's preaching at the inauguration. You have a strong connection with several Hispanics who are going down this road. You have some Indians who you see engaging with Donald Trump, who have bought into the American ideal. I'm not going to say thinking it's just a general ideal of Americanism, but perhaps that's what they think. But it's actually something that is a purveyor of this whiteness and white ideology and the supremacist thinking. And it almost feels like those who are leading this effort, let's say Donald Trump and others, they almost find it comical that you have these people of color that are backing them when they know that they are actually talking about a white-centered supreme nation again. Dr. Alexia talked about Steve Miller and his idea of immigration, right? Like going deeper into the immigration, we see with Donald Trump historically and how he's talked about immigration. He's talked about, we'd love to have people from Norway, but we don't want them from those SO countries that tend to be countries that are they're filled with people who have color. So I think there's this strange thing, and I'll even take another level real quick, where there's almost an elite white space that is doing what they have done historically in this country by saying things that make lower class or lower income white folks and some elite, financially elite people of color side with them, while at the same time creating a nation that is not for them.
Yeah. Mm. And then there's this connectedness to Christianity to it. Like there's whiteness is connected. You talk about whiteness, and one of the features, this somehow the church is in there for them. And it drags our ability to talk about what Jesus truly called us to into, I don't know, makes it very difficult, you know. There's a line he said in this, he said, ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. And I thought that was, again, telling, because again, as someone who would call itself a Christian nation, I don't think that Christ would say ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. Like, you ask yourself, what would Jesus say is the lifeblood of a great nation or the lifeblood of a great kingdom? And I just don't think ambition is it. And it's okay. I think the fact that we being the church are allowing politicians to in one voice say, we want your religious liberty, we want you to be Christian, while also building an entire structure of their political ideology around something that is not particularly Christian. We got to call that out. Right? It can't be that Donald Trump can stand up and say ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. Oh, by the way, that's a Christian nation. No, a Christian nation wouldn't say, a truly Christian nation, Christ-led, discipled nation. They're not going to say that ambition is the lifeblood. Ambition is the product of colonization, of expansion, of this desire for more. Especially in this context. So I don't know. I thought, again, a telling line that disconnects the political government of an entity like America versus the kingdom of God that Jesus has invited his church to embody. Ambition is just not in the mix. And certainly the ambition he's talking about is the ambition for growth and expansion. If we just look at the word ambition as a word, we all have ambition, and there's an innocent version of that. It's not what he's talking about. He's talking about, we want to expand, we want to grow, and the greatest nation will be known by its ambition, not by its love, not by its kindness, not by its justice, but by its ambition.
Yeah, it's that empire language that's really problematic for the church. I see Julie, I see you on here on the thread here. She says, as followers of Christ, we are building a kingdom, not an empire. Yes, but we have convoluted those things, right? Like, we have turned the building of God's kingdom into the building of and the expansion of the United States, which, for all intents and purposes, particularly in the language that Donald Trump is using in his inauguration, is if I can say like this, is there's been a kind of soft empire language in our American lexicon, right? Like, but Donald Trump is bringing that to the level of, no, we're actually coming out of the closet. We've been sort of saying that we are empire. We've been functioning that way. We never really said it because we thought it was too rude to say it to the world that we are empire building here. But that's the kind of language he's using, this frontier, this expansion. Just saying what has been at work in this country for decades. So it's not new work that we're doing. It's just he's being overt about it, and maybe that's what he loved. Oh, I'm seeing Greg Abbott, our
oh my gosh, there he is.
Our governor who's
very
coming up
exciting.
on here, getting some some flowers from Trump as we go forward. And we mentioned that Texas is going to be kind of the first the battleground, if you will.
I'd also like
for
to
some of this
say
work.
that it's white men that we can't sleep on the fact that, so we're talking about context.
Yeah, that's fair.
The context of being a believer in an America in 2025 under President Trump is that America is leaning to an imperialist, white, male focused environment. And
it's been that, but now it's
I know,
like this is overt,
but
right? Yeah.
but we're leading with it.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We're now going to unapologetically say the we that he's talking about, the true Americans, are those white men who buy into this philosophy with us and are willing to engage that, and the non-white persons who are willing to find their place in that environment and be cool. We'll establish an environment. We're going to dominate. You're going to be second. If you're cool with that, you're cool with us.
Right.
And that's the world we got to live in. And my problem with all that is it's just not what the kingdom, it's just not what Christians are called to focus in on. And it's just going to make
because with all of that, you are also recognizing that the church is in on this.
That's right. It'd be one thing if you were doing this without your Jesus t-shirt on.
Yeah. And holding
but
your
you're
Bible
doing
up
it
in
with
front
the
of the
Jesus
chapel.
with the Jesus t-shirt on. Now, if it wasn't, just like I feel about the Democrat or the left side, look, there are things that aren't Christian there that I don't have to call out as a believer because it's not damaging the witness of the church. But this other side is saying this is what God has established. That's the manifest destiny, right? This is the way God intended it. And so when you disagree with us, you're disagreeing with God's creative order. And again, that needs to be called out. It not only needs to be called out ideologically, philosophically, but the effects of that needs to be untangled. And that's where the act of justice needs to show up. And if it can't be, then we at least need to be engaging those who are hurt most by a system like that through justice work and figuring out what it means to love people in a world that doesn't love them.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Those of you who are on the stream here, we'd love to get your thoughts in here. Right, we've got a few minutes left in here. We'd love to, comments, questions, whatever's on your heart and your mind right now. How are you feeling about what we experienced today and watching the inauguration? And we've been kind of prepping for this day for a long time and wondering, is it truly going to be everything that we thought it was going to be, whether it's going to be an amazing thing for some people or a day of a fear to the others, or a day where at least this is where I am, a day where I go, okay, I see what's coming up. I see the things that have been laid down. How do I now think about and adjust the work that God has given me, this organization of Threaded, and I think truly the church to engage when we are ambassadors and aliens in a society that is not our society, that's not our context, but a context that we are doing Christian life in. Like, what are we to do forward with that? So that's kind of what I'm thinking of right now. But I'd love, if you're on the stream and you've got some thoughts and stuff, throw that in there. I do think probably it's helpful for us as we kind of make this transition into what is now at least the next 4 years of what we're going to be engaging in. What should the temperature of what is the temperature of the church? Like, what should the temperature of the church be? What should the underlying feeling of the people of God as we watch these things take place? what should our feelings and engagement be in this?
Yeah, I think the church has to decide whether they're going to spend its energies on the things that benefit themselves, the church, the Christian church itself, or participate in the true mission for which the church exists.
Okay.
There are going to be a lot of churches out there who find benefit from a Trump administration. And that benefit is what's driving their desire and connectedness to this administration. There are some moralistic agreement points that some of those churches will have with him.
Okay.
If you're pro-life and he's pro-life, or he's like, or whatever the thing is, right? So it's not a all in or all out. But I think the temperature of the church has to be, are you willing to give up the benefits that you think you would receive from an administration like this for the work of ministry and evangelism and participation in the manifestation of the community of God? Are you willing to pursue that at a cost? Because I think it's what's going to be. It's going to need to be. We are going to have to push back on some of the things, we being the church, some of the things that a Trump administration is going to do and allow and say, knowing that it's going to hurt us potentially in the long run. I'm hoping that is true. I also think that we're going to need to be creative in the way that we love. Like the more simplistic way of gathering food for a drive, or going out for a weekend, like those are fine. We can keep doing those things. But I think if we really want to love our neighbor well, we're going to have to be more creative. We're going to bring, which again, creativity comes from passionate energy and love in this context, trying to find its way out into the world and looking for unconventional ways to love our neighbor. I think we have to challenge self-love and dethrone it as a church. And I think we have to challenge our own comfort levels with what we think charity is in this moment. But we won't do any of it if we're so blinded by the fact that our guy, quote unquote, won for so many churches, and America is the most important concern and all that. So I think it's going to be hard to do that. I think churches and church leaders are afraid to say difficult things. I think the loss of a congregation, even if they can understand what I just told you, they may be leery to step too far into it because the losses feel too great. And I think it's going to take a new level of courage and strength to step into the new season with the willingness to do that.
We got some great stuff coming here on the chat, which is great. I want to engage that. You said something that I want to just make sure I highlight, which I think is such a great point, is the church's imagination for how to love their neighbor.
Yeah.
We have lived in the space of what we would call like this relief efforts after the issues have happened. Hey, here's some food, here's some backpacks, right? Here's some clothes. We see it, relief efforts usually mirror what we've seen with the fires in California, right? Like people's houses burned down. We're going to need some of that because there's going to be some folks who, in the midst of some of these policies that are coming through and the ways in which people's getting deported, things of that nature, that there's going to be some folks who are absolutely in need. And so we're going to need those things, people coming and bringing that. But the imagination part is where we expand our imagination and our work beyond just this relief effort, but also rehabilitation into areas of building power and helping people organize for their rights and activism for the things that are rights. Sorry, I'm watching this this plane on CNN that I think it's Air Force 2 or whatever that's taking, or Air Force 1 that's got the Biden and it's got Kamala Harris, and they started it like it starts smoking, and I'm like, oh, is this it? Is this what they did? They got them all on the plane, and we all out for this. Anyway, so yeah, we've got to expand our tools of engaging, loving our neighbors beyond just community development into things around activism and community organizing, things of that nature. Looking at what Alice said, as she was saying, going forward, she's looking at Micah 6:8, seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. Absolutely. I think being able to, even in our work, to be able to define justice in very biblical ways so that we can understand that there is a level of righteousness that God is calling for that is not immediately the same as what America's level of righteousness is.
Right.
And what that means is there's going to be things that happen in America that are perfectly legal and quote unquote righteous by an American standard that may not line up with God's standard of righteousness and justice. And we've seen throughout the Bible that when laws are unjust laws, that the people of God sacrifice themselves for standing up against those laws, or standing up for the people who are experiencing the oppression because of the laws. We see that in Shifra and Pua, and what Pharaoh did in Moses' time in Exodus, where he was wanting them to kill the firstborn males, and they said, we're not going to do that. We saw that in Daniel and his crew, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We see that in Jesus, who ultimately walking around saying that he, was God's son, right? Talking about tearing down the temple and doing things that were going to be against Rome. He accepted his role as a criminal inside of the Roman law, and still stood for what was right. So we know that that's going to be thinking about seeking justice. We have to make sure that we are responding and pursuing justice in terms of what God has laid out, and that requires us to walk humbly with our God. And do that. So that's definitely something that Alice is talking about as well. Let's see what Julie's got here. I think watching my own heart for lack of love for those who disagree with her, and divisive thinking, loving all my neighbors, and continue to focus on the mission of God. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely what we need to keep moving forward on that. We need to be a compass for our communities. The churches need to be a compasses. Alice, I'm not sure if you're saying churches should be amoral. Oh, a moral compass. There we go. I was like, churches should just be amoral. No, amoral compass for our communities. I see it. Thank you very much for that. Yes. All of this, agree. It's
going to be hard to do because, again, so many churches believe they've won. So it could produce this lackadaisical approach to things, and add to it that we're fighting the holy war, so we've demonized the other side. So I don't want to love the other side. I want to get the demons out. Again, flee or fight or flee. So we're going to deport them, and we're going to attack the other side as spiritually demonic, as opposed to
yes, I can't. That's going to be a really interesting aspect of our work going forward. So much of what we do in Threaded is really walking inside of the church community.
Yeah,
trying to create those bridges between the people of God, believing that there is place for us to unite and engage with the work of, I'll use the word justice, with the work of cross-cultural engagement, that we can all look to the scriptures and look at the meta-narrative and see that the mission of God, to use the language Julie was using in the thread, to see that the mission of God is constantly drawing people together across these cultures and tribes and tongues and nations, because there's a belief that God made all people in his image, and therefore everyone is equal in the eyes of God and should be treated equitably. And that society that God wants to create is one that is modeling his version of righteousness, his version of justice, and therefore it's a place where all people are flourishing. It's going to be hard to live into that while we live into what I would continually call a country that has its own version of what equality and equity looks like, and what a society of America should look like. If the society of America is based on what Donald Trump is saying, is we shouldn't have people from other countries living here, and it's perfectly okay for a country to say that. Countries can make those decisions and
Just
make
don't
those
call
laws,
it a Christian
right?
nation.
And yeah, they can create it as a Christian. They can create it as a quote unquote Christian nation in their definition of what Christian nation means. But we've got to be ever vigilant about walking humbly with our God to really know the heart of God and what the Spirit of God is saying. How are the things that are happening in our environment, our society, in our country, how are they impacting the image of God? No, how are they impacting the image bearers of God?
Yeah.
And how do we step into that to make sure that they are being treated as if they are those who are made in the image of God?
All right.
And that's going to be
It's going to be a thing. Well, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I don't think we should feel hopeless or despondent. I think regardless of the president, Trump or Kamala or whoever, the church has an assignment. There's never going to be an era that the church does not have an assignment. There's never going to be an era that the church does not have something to overcome in its context. Trump brings his context to us. We need to understand it, and we need to understand our role and how we live out the principles of the kingdom of God in it. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. It's the reason we were born, for this time, for this period. It's not new or a surprise to God. He has the church in this country at this time to do this work. And so if you're a part of that, then be emboldened, be encouraged, acknowledge reality. Let's not live into fairy tale land, and let's do what we need to do to carry the cross into this context.
And what if this moment, what if this current moment and this current divide, if you will, is exactly what the church needs to be inspired and ignited,
Stirred up,
yeah, into what I believe is one of our most powerful ways to impact a society, is that we have a God that has created a people from all tribes and tongues and nations, and that we've seen throughout the world that this understanding of who God is and who Christ is has traversed every nation and every culture and found a home. And it's been able to unite people across all kinds of boundaries and barriers, across all kinds of hostility and enmity, that Jesus has done that historically and can continue to do it if we, the people who are his people, will bring him into the conversation and let him lead for us. And that's what we plan to help the church continue to do as we go forward in this conversation. So we're grateful that you all joined us for this watch of the inauguration. Sorry that the peoples at YouTube and Instagram and Facebook didn't like C-SPAN, but I know many of you were watching along as we were going on. I'd like to thank all the guests that came through. Aaron Jones, Alexia Savatiera, Alex K, Stephen Reeves. Just so exciting to be able to have a lot of those conversations that I know people were thinking through. We'll give a shout out to the crew, the threaded crew. Schmevin's behind us over here, working on all the tech stuff. He came over early and set up, so thank you, Schmevin, for all that work. You guys can't see the other videos that we have, but I know We have Chino's in the house, who's been working on overlays and in the chat, throwing some stuff as well. Peppa has been rolling too. She is not wanting to be on camera, although I should pull her up and let her say hi. But made sure all of our guests had what they needed to do. And give a shout out to my wife. We have been taking over her house with all of this, and so I'm grateful for that. And my son Solomon, who is cooking Pop-Tarts back there, I think in the back.
That's okay.
Yeah,
we'll take it.
It's all good. And thank you for everybody.
I feel an imperialist instinct coming on in relationship to these Pop-Tarts. Yeah.
Hey, thank you guys for watching. This is Color Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. We are not leaving you. We are going to be coming more at these next 4 years. You can expect to hear more from us, to continue having this conversation and guiding you in this. And we want you to continue to participate. So please, if you are not engaged with us, check us out on Instagram. You can go to wearethreaded.org and you can find out all the things you need to know about us. And as we start this year, it's a great opportunity for all of us to start together, to just start. If you have not done it, it's an opportunity for just starting this work, and you can go to wearethreaded.org and find out how you can just start in this conversation and just start with us too. So we thank you for listening, and we will see you as we move into this next 4 years. May God bless America, and may God bless his church, who gets to be ambassadors of reconciliation in this country together. We'll see you next time.